at family dinner, my mother-in-law hit me, pushed me out, and said, "Get out of my house." And I was already laughing inside, because the deed was in my name and she was the one evicted. Okay, so buckle up, because this is a long one. My palms are still sweaty just thinking about it. I'm Michelle, and I've been married to Tom for, God, has it really been 8 years already? 8 years of mostly bliss, punctuated by the occasional Category 5 hurricane named Carol, my mother-in-law. See, Tom's family has this tradition. Every Sunday, we all trek out to Carol's place in LA for dinner. We lived in a cozy little bungalow in Pasadena, a world away from the sprawling Spanish-style hacienda Carol called home. The drive itself was a ritual, Tom humming along to the radio, oblivious to the knot tightening in my stomach, me forcing a smile and reminding myself that it was just a few hours. A few hours I could endure for Tom. The house itself was impressive, I'll give her that. Big, sprawling, pool in the back, the whole 9 yards. Bougainvillea climbed the white stucco walls, fragrant and vibrant, a stark contrast to the icy atmosphere inside. It was idyllic, in a Stepford Wives kind of way, or maybe more like a Tennessee Williams play, simmering with unspoken resentments and carefully constructed facades. Roast chicken, always slightly overcooked and dry, like Carol's sense of humor. Mashed potatoes that tasted suspiciously like instant, fluffy and devoid of any real substance, just like the conversation. And green beans swimming in butter, the only thing on the table that seemed to genuinely enjoy its existence. The same faces around the table every week. Tom's older sister, Sarah, with her perpetually bored husband, David, who communicated primarily through grunts and raised eyebrows. And their 2 hellions, sorry children, Ashley and Josh, who treated the house like their personal bouncy castle, leaving a trail of sticky fingerprints and discarded toys in their wake. The cacophony of their shrieks and the clatter of cutlery against china always gave me a headache. And presiding over it all, Queen Carol, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile that could curdle milk. She'd glide around the dining room, refilling wine glasses and offering second helpings, her voice a melodious purr that belied the steel beneath. She'd touch my arm lightly, her fingers lingering a moment too long, a subtle reminder of her presence, of her territory. I could feel my muscles tense beneath her touch, a visceral reaction I couldn't control. Initially, I thought the coolness was just typical MIL stuff. You know, the "she'll never be good enough for my son" routine. I tried, I really did. I baked her favorite lemon poppy seed cookies, the scent of citrus and sugar filling my own small kitchen as I imagined winning her over. I complimented her questionable decorating choices, the abundance of porcelain dolls and the clashing floral patterns, forcing a smile and hoping it reached my eyes. I even offered to help in the kitchen, a gesture met with a frosty, "Oh, honey, you just relax, you're a guest." Her voice, though sweet, held a note of dismissal, a clear demarcation of roles. "Besides, dear," she added, her eyes twinkling with a hint of malice, "I wouldn't want you to ruin my famous roast chicken." She patted my hand, a condescending gesture that made my teeth clench. I'd retreat to the living room, plastering a smile on my face, and engaging in polite, meaningless conversation with Sarah and David. Tom, bless his oblivious heart, would be chatting animatedly with his mother, completely unaware of the subtle jabs and undercurrents of tension swirling around us. He'd catch my eye occasionally, flashing me a warm smile, and I'd force myself to return it, not wanting to burden him with the discomfort I felt in his family's presence. But the vibe never really shifted. There was always this underlying tension, this sense that I was an intruder in her perfect little world. A tiny crack in her porcelain facade. Little did she know. It wasn't just a cool vibe. It was a slow, simmering boil, the kind that threatens to scald you before you even realize the water's hot. Over the years, Carol's little digs became more frequent, more pointed. The backhanded compliments, disguised as concern, were her specialty. "Oh, Michelle, that dress is interesting. Are you sure it's flattering?" she'd murmur, her eyes raking over my outfit with a thinly veiled disdain. Or, "Honey, you've been looking a little tired lately. Are you sure you're getting enough rest? Tom needs a wife who can keep up with him. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating, that I was somehow failing in my wifely duties. She'd also developed this habit of accidentally forgetting things I'd told her, like the time I mentioned I was vegetarian. She served me a plate piled high with roast beef, her eyes wide with faux innocence. Oh dear, I completely forgot. Silly me. Well, I'm sure just this once won't hurt. The forced smile plastered on her face made my stomach churn. Or the time I told her I was allergic to lilies. Guess what flowers she filled the house with for my birthday? She claimed it was a simple oversight, but the knowing glint in her eye told a different story. It was a power play, a subtle way of asserting her dominance, of reminding me that I was an outsider in her domain. The real kicker, though, was the way she tried to undermine my relationship with Tom. She'd constantly call him with emergencies that miraculously resolved themselves the moment I arrived. Flat tires, leaky faucets, rogue squirrels in the attic, you name it, Carol had experienced it. It was like she was trying to create a wedge between us, to make him feel like he had to choose between his mother and his wife. Oh, Tommy, you're such a good son, she'd coo, clutching his hand dramatically. I don't know what I'd do without you. I could practically feel her claws digging into his arm, pulling him back into her orbit. And Tom, bless his heart, he just lapped it up. He was so used to his mother's theatrics that he couldn't see the manipulation for what it was. Whenever I tried to point it out, he'd just brush it off. She's just lonely, Michelle, he'd say, his voice laced with a hint of impatience. She needs us, or, you're being too sensitive. She doesn't mean anything by it. He was blinded by his love for her, unable to see the subtle ways she was trying to control him, to control us. It was infuriating, this willful blindness, this inability to see the woman behind the mask. It made me feel like I was going crazy, like I was the only one who could see the truth. And the truth was, Carol was drowning. Not literally, of course, but financially. Turns out, maintaining that sprawling hacienda was more than she could afford. She'd been hiding it from the family, borrowing money from shady lenders, maxing out credit cards, the whole 9 yards. She was terrified of losing the house, the symbol of her status, the last vestige of her carefully constructed perfect life. I found out by accident, overhearing a hushed phone conversation she had with her sister. She thought she was alone in the kitchen, but I was in the pantry, grabbing a bottle of water, and I heard everything. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of shock and, I'll admit it, a flicker of something else, something that felt a lot like satisfaction. I didn't tell Tom. Part of me wanted to protect him, to shield him from the truth about his mother. But another part of me, a darker, more selfish part, wanted to see how it all played out. I knew that house was her Achilles heel, her weak spot, and I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if she lost it. It was a Sunday like any other. Roast chicken, dry as the Sahara. Mashed potatoes, suspiciously smooth. Green beans, glistening with butter. The usual suspects were all present and accounted for. Sarah, David, the Hellions, and, of course, Queen Carol, holding court at the head of the table. The air was thick with the usual forced pleasantries and simmering resentments. We were discussing, or rather enduring, a particularly tedious monologue from Carol about her latest charity luncheon when it happened. I can't even remember what prompted it, some innocuous comment I made about the exorbitant price of organic kale. It was something so trivial, so utterly insignificant, that it's almost comical in retrospect. But Carol, she latched onto it like a pit bull with a chew toy. Her eyes narrowed, her smile vanishing like a mirage in the desert. "Oh, Michelle," she purred, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. "Always so practical, aren't we? Some of us, appreciate the finer things in life." She gestured vaguely around the room, at the expensive furniture and the ornate decorations, a silent reminder of her supposed superiority. My jaw tightened. I could feel the familiar heat rising in my chest, the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I kept my voice even, my tone calm. "I just think it's important to be mindful of how we spend our money. I said, my words measured and deliberate, especially in these uncertain times. I knew it was a risky move, mentioning her precarious financial situation, but I couldn't resist the subtle dig. The air in the room crackled. Everyone froze, their forks suspended mid-air, their eyes darting between Carol and me. The silence stretched, taut and uncomfortable. Then Carol's face contorted in a mask of rage. The carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the raw fury beneath. She slammed her hand on the table, the china rattling precariously. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "How dare you question me in my own house?" And then, before I could even process what was happening, her hand lashed out, a sharp, stinging slap across my cheek. The room spun, the sound of the impact echoing in my ears. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my face, the shock radiating through my body. The heat of the slap, the sting, the sheer humiliation of it all. It was surreal. I could feel the eyes of the entire family on me, a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Tom gasped, his face pale. Sarah and David exchanged a look of stunned silence. Even the hellions for once were quiet, their eyes wide with disbelief. The slap was bad enough, but what came next was even worse. Carol, her chest heaving, her face flushed with anger, shoved me hard, her fingers digging into my arm. "Get out of my house!" she shrieked, her voice raw with fury. "Get out!" The words hung in the air, heavy and charged with emotion. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The shock and humiliation gave way to a strange sense of calm, a detached amusement that I couldn't quite explain. I looked at her contorted face, at the veins throbbing in her neck, and I started to laugh. Not out loud, of course. That would have been unwise. But inside, I was laughing. I was laughing so hard I thought I might cry. Because, you see, there was something Carol didn't know. Something that I hadn't told anyone, not even Tom. Something that made her furious outburst, her dramatic eviction, utterly, hilariously pointless. The house. It wasn't hers. It was mine. The ringing in my ears was almost louder than Carol's screaming. My cheek throbbed, a dull, insistent pulse beneath my fingertips. The force of her shoves still resonated in my shoulders, a physical echo of her rage. But amidst the shock and the humiliation, a strange calm settled over me. It was like a switch had flipped in my brain, silencing the panic, the hurt, the rising tide of anger. It was replaced by almost a sense of amusement, a dark, twisted amusement that I knew was probably inappropriate, but I couldn't help it. Because in that moment, as Carol stood there, chest heaving, face contorted, screaming at me to get out of her house, I realized something. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I'd been subconsciously orchestrating for months. This was the perfect storm. See, a few months ago, when I overheard Carol's panicked phone call about the house, I'd done some digging. Turns out, her shady lenders were even shadier than I'd imagined. They were operating outside the law, using predatory tactics to trap vulnerable homeowners like Carol. And she, in her desperation to keep up appearances, had fallen right into their trap. She'd signed away the house without fully understanding the terms of the agreement, blinded by her fear of losing everything. I'd contacted a lawyer, a friend of a friend, who specialized in these kinds of cases. He was shocked by the blatant illegality of the loan and assured me we could challenge it. And we did. Quietly, discreetly, behind the scenes. Tom knew nothing about it. He was so wrapped up in his own world, in his mother's manufactured crises, that he wouldn't have noticed anything amiss. Besides, I told myself, it was better this way. Better to protect him from the messy details, from the ugly truth about his mother's financial recklessness. The legal battle had been long and tedious, but ultimately, we'd won. The loan was declared invalid and the ownership of the house reverted back to Carol. But here's the thing. Before the final ruling, I'd quietly purchased the debt from the lenders. It was a gamble, a risky move, but I knew it was my only chance. My only chance to finally take control, to finally level the playing field. And now, here I was, standing in my living room, being screamed at by a woman who thought she still owned the place. The irony was almost too delicious to bear. I could have told her then and there. I could have revealed the truth, watched the color drain from her face as she realized the extent of her folly. But I didn't. Something held me back. A strange sense of, I don't know, power? Revenge? It was a heady cocktail, and I found myself unwilling to relinquish the glass just yet. So I stood there, silent, my hand still pressed to my burning cheek, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Let her rant, I thought. Let her rage. Let her think she's still in control. Because the truth, the beautiful, liberating truth, was just waiting to be unleashed. And when it was, it would be a reckoning unlike any she'd ever experienced. Tom, bless his clueless heart, rushed to my side, his hand hovering over my cheek like he was afraid to touch it. "Michelle, are you okay? Mom, what the hell was that?" His voice was a mix of concern and disbelief, the shock of the situation finally penetrating his usual obliviousness. "She needs to leave, Tom," I said, my voice surprisingly steady given the circumstances. I didn't meet his eyes. My gaze was fixed on Carol, who was now pacing the dining room like a caged tiger, her face a mask of fury. "Michelle, please," he pleaded, his hand gripping my arm. "Just calm down. Don't make a scene." He was whispering, his eyes darting nervously towards his family, who were watching the unfolding drama with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Sarah had her hand plastered over her mouth, her eyes wide. David, for once, looked almost animated, a flicker of amusement in his usually dull eyes. The kids, thankfully, were occupied with dissecting a leftover roll, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Make a scene?" I repeated, a hint of steel creeping into my voice. "She just hit me, Tom." And then she told me to get out of her house. I emphasized the word her, letting the irony hang in the air like a thick fog. He flinched, his grip tightening on my arm. I know, he hissed, his voice low and urgent. "But just, please, let's just go. We can talk about this later." He was trying to pull me towards the door, his body tense with the effort of trying to control the situation, to contain the explosion. But I wasn't moving. I was rooted to the spot, my feet planted firmly on my floor. "No, Tom," I said, my voice calm and deliberate. "I'm not going anywhere." That's when Carol really lost it. The initial shock of my defiance seemed to ignite a fresh wave of fury. She spun around, her face contorted in a mask of rage. "You ungrateful little bitch," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the room. "After all I've done for you, after all I've given you, and you have the nerve to stand there and defy me in my own house?" The words poured out of her, a torrent of venom and self-righteousness. She railed against my perceived ingratitude, my supposed disrespect, her voice rising in pitch and volume with each accusation. She painted herself as the victim, the long-suffering mother, wronged by the conniving daughter-in-law. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, complete with dramatic hand gestures and crocodile tears. I watched her, a strange sense of detachment washing over me, like I was watching a play unfold on a distant stage. "This is my house," she screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. "I built this house. I worked my whole life for this house. And you think you can just waltz in here and take it from me?" She was practically frothing at the mouth now, her eyes wild and unfocused. The carefully constructed facade had completely shattered, revealing the raw, unfiltered rage beneath. It was terrifying, and yet strangely exhilarating, because with every word she uttered, with every accusation she hurled, she was digging herself deeper and deeper into a hole she wouldn't be able to climb out of. The rest of the family watched in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Tom was still clutching my arm, his face pale and drawn, his eyes pleading with me to just let it go, to just walk away. But I couldn't, not now, not after all these years. This was it. This was the moment of truth. And I wasn't about to back down. The silence that followed Carol's tirade was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, the silent judgment, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Tom finally released my arm, his hand dropping to his side like a lead weight. He looked defeated, broken, caught in the crossfire of his mother's rage and my unwavering silence. And in that silence, as the echoes of Carol's screams faded, a wave of something washed over me. Not triumph, not exactly. More like a weary resignation, a quiet understanding that this was the inevitable culmination of years of simmering resentment, of subtle jabs and carefully calculated manipulations, years of swallowing my anger, of forcing a smile, of pretending that everything was fine when it so clearly wasn't, years of being the outsider, the intruder, the unwelcome guest in Carol's carefully constructed kingdom. Had I been too harsh? The question pricked at the edges of my calm, a tiny flicker of doubt in the otherwise steady flame of my resolve. Was there another way? A more peaceful solution? Could I have handled it differently, avoided this dramatic, almost theatrical confrontation? Maybe. Perhaps a quiet conversation, a gentle nudge towards reality, could have achieved the same result without the public spectacle, without the raw, visceral display of anger and humiliation. But then another thought, colder and harder, pushed its way to the surface. Would she have listened? Would she have even heard me, over the roar of her own self-righteousness, over the deafening clamor of her carefully constructed delusions? I thought back to all the times I'd tried to connect with her, to bridge the gap between us, the cookies, the compliments, the offers to help. All met with the same dismissive smile, the same subtle jabs, the same underlying message. You don't belong here. You're not one of us. And then I thought about the way she'd treated Tom, the way she'd manipulated him, used him, kept him tethered to her apron strings with a mixture of guilt and manufactured crises. And the way he'd blindly accepted it, unable or unwilling to see the truth. No, a quiet conversation wouldn't have worked. Carol wouldn't have listened. She wouldn't have understood. She only understood power. And for years, she'd held all the cards. She'd controlled the narrative, dictated the terms, set the rules of engagement. But now, the tables had turned, the power had shifted, and she was about to learn a very hard lesson. The silence stretched, taut, and uncomfortable. I could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken questions hanging in the air like a thick fog. And in that silence, I made a decision. I wouldn't break. I wouldn't apologize. I wouldn't back down. I would let the silence speak for itself. I would let her stew in her own uncertainty, in the slowly dawning realization that something had shifted, that the ground beneath her feet was no longer solid. It was a power play, yes, but it was a quiet one, a subtle one, a whisper in the darkness rather than a shout from the rooftops. And in that quiet, in that stillness, I felt a sense of, not peace, not exactly, but something close to it. A sense of control, of agency, of finally having the upper hand. It was a dangerous feeling, intoxicating, almost addictive. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't going back. I was done playing by Carol's rules. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. It's quiet now, so quiet. It's been almost a week since the incident. A week since Carol's dramatic exit, since the stunned silence of the family, since Tom's heartbroken pleas for me to just let it go. A week since the eviction notice was served. The house is empty now, except for me. Tom's staying at Sarah's. To give me some space, he said. He calls every day, his voice tight with worry, asking if I'm okay, if I've changed my mind, if I'll reconsider. Reconsider what, exactly? Giving her back my house? Apologizing for, what, existing? Breathing? Taking up space in her precious world? I haven't answered his calls. I need time. Time to process, to breathe, to just be. In the silence, in the stillness, in the house that is finally, truly mine. The bougainvillea outside is still blooming, a riot of vibrant color against the white stucco walls. The pool shimmers in the afternoon sun, undisturbed by splashing children or Carol's endless complaints about the water temperature. The porcelain dolls are gone, packed away in boxes, banished to some dusty corner of Sarah's garage. The clashing floral patterns have been replaced by soft, neutral tones, calming and serene. The air is clear, free of the cloying scent of lilies and the heavy weight of unspoken resentments. It's strange, this quiet, this peace. It's almost unsettling. After years of navigating the minefield of Carol's passive-aggressive jabs and thinly veiled insults, this sudden absence of conflict feels wrong somehow, like a missing limb, a phantom pain. I keep expecting her to appear, to materialize in the doorway, her face contorted in a mask of fury, her voice dripping with venom. But she doesn't. She's gone, and the silence that remains is both a relief and a burden. I walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the polished floors. I touch the walls, the furniture, the smooth, cool surface of the granite countertops. It's all mine. This space, this sanctuary, this kingdom. And for the first time in a long time, I feel a sense of ownership, of belonging, of finally being home. But the quiet is deceptive. Beneath the surface, the questions still churn, relentless and insistent. Did I go too far? Was there another way? Could I have handled it differently? The doubts whisper in the stillness, insidious and persistent. They claw at the edges of my newfound peace, threatening to unravel the fragile tapestry of my resolve. I look out at the pool, at the shimmering water, at the bougainvillea cascading over the walls, a vibrant splash of color against the clear blue sky. And I think about Carol, about her carefully constructed world, her desperate attempts to maintain the illusion of control, of perfection, about her rage, her humiliation, her utter disbelief when the eviction notice arrived. I imagine her face, contorted in a mask of fury and despair, as she realized the extent of her loss. And I wonder, what is she doing now? Where is she living? Is she okay? The question catches me off guard, a flicker of empathy in the otherwise cold, hard core of my resolve. I push it away, telling myself she brought this on herself, that she deserves whatever consequences she's facing. But the question lingers, a persistent hum beneath the surface of my consciousness. So Reddit, I'm asking you, AITA? Am I the asshole for letting my mother-in-law believe the house was hers until that moment? Was I wrong to evict her, even though she assaulted me? Was my silence, my quiet power play, too cruel? Or was it simply justice? I need an outside perspective. I need to know, did I do the right thing,